This information is not intended as legal, health, or nutritional advice. It is provided for informational purposes only. The Natural Health Product Protection Association does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements, views, or opinions presented by guests or attendees. Since 2008, NHPPA has been dedicated to protecting the natural health industry. Our recent campaigning began in June of 2023, and since then, our achievements have been nothing short of remarkable, and it's all thanks to our community. We kicked things off with a national campaign to educate the country, including an in-depth discussion paper written by Shawn Buckley, a live legal review, and industry Zoom calls to educate the nation about the risks facing natural health products. This was followed by a campaign to pressure our MPs, where we filled their desks with letters and postcards to educate them and request their support. This campaign led the Standing Committee on Health to hold 2 meetings to discuss Health Canada's proposed changes to our natural health product regulations, garnered mainstream media attention, and contributed to the official opposition incorporating the protection of natural health products into their party platform. Perhaps most exciting, Shawn Buckley drafted a private member's bill to repeal sections 500 to 504 of Bill C-47. After consultation with Mr. Buckley, MP Blaine Calkins brought a private member's bill for the same purpose to the House of Commons on December 5th. We are collecting signatures in support of this bill, now called Bill C-368, so if you haven't signed yet, you can find the link on our website. Staying on the topic of petitions, in the fall of 2023, we collected 15,000 new signatures in support of the Charter of Health Freedom, bringing us that much closer to our goal of 250,000. What we're doing is working. We're making a difference, and all of our achievements are credited to your involvement, so we thank you for being part of our community and taking action. Help us help you. If NHPPA's work to protect your natural health product and practice freedom is important to you, please make a one-time or monthly donation by visiting nhppa.org/donate.
All right, good day, everybody. I hope you are all well. My name is Brett Hawes, and I am honored and delighted to be hosting this live stream with Shawn Buckley and MP Blaine Calkins. Shawn, Blaine, welcome. How are you today?
Good. Pleased to see you, Brett.
Yes, likewise. And I think the intro video was really a good introduction and a sketch to guide us into today's conversation. Just to give those of you watching live a little bit of an overview of what we plan to cover today, we're going to be talking about the high-level sort of risks to natural health products, which I'm sure many of you know about already. And then we're going to spend most of our time today talking about the parliamentary process, the private members bill that's been introduced, and what the road forward looks like in terms of our challenge to Bill C-47 and the threat to natural health products. So, Shawn, I'm going to hand things over to you just to kick us off. And, there might be some people who are not familiar with what's happening at the moment. But how did we get to this point now with regards to, the history of the attack on natural health products, specifically C-47?
Okay, thanks, Brett. So the mischief actually began back in the 1930s when our Food and Drug Act in its present form was enacted. And I've said publicly, and Mr. Castles from the University of Victoria is also lecturing quite publicly now about how our drug laws are actually there to protect intellectual property rights. And so the mischief is actually our drug model that when we brought in wasn't ever intended to be applied to natural products, but which now is being applied to natural products. And how the drug model works is that the government passes a definition of drug that is so broad that it covers anything used for therapeutic purpose. So, Brett, if I said to you, you look a little dehydrated, will you drink some water? I've just made water a drug because I'm now advertising its use for a therapeutic purpose. And the rest of us will be thinking, well, that's a little ridiculous, and it is. So step one is you define drug so broadly that if you're going to use it for a therapeutic purpose, so either to prevent or to treat an illness, now everything is a drug, regardless of what it is, regardless of how long we've used it, regardless of whether it's in our food supply. The next trick is then you make it illegal to use a drug unless it's been approved of by the government. So you basically put in your Food and Drug Act a licensing requirement. So now we're in a situation where everything is a drug that's used for a therapeutic purpose, and you can only use drugs that have been approved of by the government. And we may all agree, and we may not agree, that if we're talking about novel chemicals that have never been introduced into the human body, especially if we're suggesting that it be, used widespread, that likely it's a good idea to have some brakes on that and maybe have to jump through some hoops, like showing it's safe and showing that it kind of works. But when we're talking about things that we've been using for thousands of years in which we eat daily, that model breaks down. Now, the third thing we do, so remember, now everything's a drug. You can only use drugs the government approves of. The third thing we do is we make the drug approval process for serious conditions so expensive that only drugs that have patents go through the process. So in the lifetime of everyone on this call, there's only been one drug that did not have a patent get through the new drug approval process, and it was sponsored by government. So we might as well have written in the Food and Drug Act, it is illegal to treat any serious health condition without a chemical drug that had a patent when it was approved, because that's the effect of our law. Now, that's deliberate. We can pretend it's not deliberate, but all things in the drug approval world are very well thought out and deliberate. Now, what's happening is, so I said this is the case for serious conditions. What's happening is Health Canada wants to protect more intellectual property rights, so they're lowering the bar so that basically it will become illegal to treat anything at all, except for the most minor of conditions, without something that had a patent when it went through the drug approval process. So right now, our natural health products, we're in the drug model. We lost that fight back in 2004. We have to, re-engage that fight. We're in the drug model, but it's kind of a soft drug model. So it's illegal to use ginger tea, for example, to treat nausea, even though we've been doing it for 2,000 years, because the government says it is, because we're a drug. So we have to go through this approval process where we have to show safety, which is kind of silly when you can just go to the supermarket and buy ginger tea because it tastes good. But we have to prove it's safe, and then we have to prove it works. And we've been allowed to use traditional use evidence to prove that it works. Well, we're losing that. And we're losing the right to go through a soft approval pathway for products that practitioners use to treat us. So, your nutritionists, your naturopathic doctors, your homeopathic doctors, your traditional Chinese practitioners, they all rely on natural health products to treat us. And those products have been licensed through the natural health product regulations. They are now going to have to go through this expensive new drug approval process. So the effect is we are going to lose all of those products. I mean, it just full stop. That's going to happen. Another thing that's happening is cost recovery. So the goal is to force natural health products to comply with the chemical drug regulations so that there's full harmonization. Well, the drug companies pay quite large fees to Health Canada. In fact, most of Health Canada's budget comes from these fees. No conflict of interest there. But they want to impose these fees on natural health product companies. But the difficulty is because natural health product companies don't have intellectual property rights, and there's really tough competition and margins are tight, this is actually going to put a lot of businesses under. So they're going to cease acting, and we're going to lose those products. It's also going to drive the price of the remaining products up. And in some instances, it's likely going to remove entire disciplines. So homeopathic doctors, I think for a full scope of practice, they need something like 12 to 1400 different remedies. So access to, if you're going to have a full scope of practice. Well, no supplier in Canada is going to pay the yearly licensing fee for that number of products. So, I don't know, what are they going to do? Are they going to pick maybe the 250 most, used ones? And so all our homeopathic doctors will have a truncated practice. We don't know, but it's going to have a dramatic impact on their ability to practice. And the same with traditional Chinese practitioners. So they need roughly 800 different remedies. And I'd spoken to their largest supplier in Canada, and they just said, we're out of business. Like, just with the yearly licensing fee, we're done. There's no way we can stay in business with that. So, and then the final, I shouldn't say final, they're going to fully harmonize us with the chemical drug regs, which will totally bankrupt the industry and drive them out. It's completely unnecessary. I should just add, before I kind of segue into this Bill C-47 and the focus of our call today, is when Health Canada is telling us that, well, we need to collect costs from the natural health product industry, and just ignoring that they're already collecting GST on us, where they don't on the chemical drugs. But when they say we need to collect these costs, they say, but don't worry, we're not going to waste the money. We're going to use every penny to hire new Health Canada inspectors to do two things. One is to make sure that there's strict compliance with the new stricter regulations that are being imposed on you. But the second thing is they're going to go out into the marketplace and basically combat misinformation. So what the effect is they're going to basically censor truthful health information. And how this works is despite, our guarantee of freedom of expression in Section 2B of the Charter and our very strong common law tradition of freedom of expression, and despite there being no prohibition in the Food and Drug Act or regulations, Health Canada takes the position that you are not allowed to say anything about a drug except for the Health Canada approved claim. So when you go through this licensing process, Health Canada will approve a claim. So I like using True Hope as an example. So their product, it's called Empower Plus. It's a vitamin and mineral supplement. It was designed and is likely the best treatment for bipolar disorder and major depressive order in the world. And there are 30 peer-reviewed publications and some in blue chip journals like Journal of Psychiatry, Journal of Child and Adolescent Psychopharmacology. 30 peer-reviewed research publications. Every single one of those 30 were funded by governments, because government agencies or faculties of medicine or the like came to realize that this product was so revolutionary that government should spend taxpayer money on research, and the governments agreed. Now, their approved label claim is something like supports mental health and well-being. So Health Canada would take the position they can't share with you those peer-reviewed journal publications funded by governments, including Canadian governments. All they can say is it supports mental health and well-being. And Health Canada takes that position, on every drug. So, for example, many naturopathic doctors advertise, hey, I've got vitamin C, intravenous for this, and I've got this treatment, this treatment. They tend to advertise more than the other healing traditions. Well, it doesn't matter that everything they say is 100% true. Health Canada goes after them to take those ads away because it exceeds the label claim. And let's ignore the fact that they're perfectly free to use treatments for conditions other than the label claim. It's called off-label use, and healthcare practitioners, medical doctors, naturopaths, and the like are allowed to use off-label use. So let's just ignore Health Canada has no jurisdiction to censor them. They do. And so we're entering a world where it is becoming completely illegal, and there will be this army of inspectors to ensure that it's the case that healthcare practitioners can't actually share with you truthful information. And if they're not able to share with you truthful information, where does that leave us as, citizens in trying to navigate how we're going to prevent illness or how we're going to treat illness? Now, the final thing, and this brings us into the conversation with MP Blaine Calkins, is there were very high penalties on pharmaceutical companies. So the chemical pharmaceutical companies. So let's say Pfizer, broke the law. So they violated the Food and Drug Act or regulations on a drug. Heaven forbid that would happen, right? So let's say they did. Well, the maximum fine they would face would be $5 million a day. Now, for a company like Pfizer, that's pocket change. It's meant to hurt. Like, fines are meant to bring about compliance. Like, so when we put penalties in legislation, the goal isn't to destroy people. The goal isn't to be excessively punitive. The goal is to get it so that most people will comply. You never get 100% compliance. So there's kind of this balance. Well, how do we get most people to comply? So when you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies that are making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, it's got to be a $5 million a day fine in the hopes that it hurts a little bit, enough that they will bring compliance. Now, a $5 million a day fine would be a little excessive for your local naturopathic doctor. And it would be a little excessive for, your natural health product company that, even the big ones probably, have a gross that, is measured maybe in the tens of millions, but, definitely not more than that. And most of the companies are quite small. So you never want to impose a fine that will actually take somebody out of business and totally destroy them. And another danger when you're in the area of health law is sometimes the regulator is wrong and they're telling you to do something, and you've got actually criminal code obligations to prevent harm, or you have ethical obligations to prevent harm. And you would hope that the fine is such that you're going to get hurt for actually doing the right thing, but you're not going to be destroyed. I mean, one example, the two examples come to mind. I mean, I recall when the government told True Hope to stop selling, and psychiatrists and doctors in, large numbers were writing to the Minister of Health saying, you can't take this product away or there will be deaths. And then Health Canada took the product away for a short period of time, and there were a number of deaths. And the court found that there were a number of deaths and found it was legally necessary for True Hope to defy the government. Well, with $5 million a day fines, True Hope likely couldn't have done that. And, nattokinase comes to mind when Health Canada told people to take nattokinase off the market. And a large number of medical doctors were managing people on nattokinase other than, rather than warfarin or Pradaxa, which was causing a number of deaths at the time. And it was irresponsible to do that. It likely led to death. So there are times when the regulator gets it wrong, but we've not wanted these $5 million a day fines. Well, what happened is, and just by way of background, we resisted those. Those fines came in, first were tried in 2008 in Bill C-51. And then in 2014, they came in for the pharmaceutical companies under Vanessa's law. And that was just a great marketing way to get it in. How can anyone resist that? But we warned it was just the beginning. It was going to be the Trojan horse. And here we are. So in last year's budget bill, and so the budget bill is the bill where, the federal government spending is. I don't know how much the federal government spends, but, it's a few dollars anyway. And they're long bills. They're complicated. And often because you're doing new programs and changing things, you make changes to some of the other laws so that it works for your spending. But they snuck in there, and I say snuck in because this had nothing to do with spending. They snuck in their changes that basically applied the pharmaceutical penalties and powers that Health Canada has over the chemical drug industry onto the natural health product community. And this didn't go to the standing committee for debate. It just, got rushed through without, the experts being able to look at it. And so basically, we feel like we've been sandbagged by this. And now, companies are subject to fines that will just totally cripple them and basically take away their opportunity to act ethically or, comply with their criminal code obligations if they're in a fight with Health Canada over whether or not to leave a product on the market. So Mr. Blaine Calkins is an MP in Parliament. He's been an MP for 14 years. He became concerned about this, and he's brought about a private member's bill. So Blaine, I'll invite you to jump in.
Sure.
And explain to us how you got involved and what you're doing.
Well, I was actually just riveted by the ability that you have to replay everything that's happened in the last number of years. And I have been around for quite some time. And you're exactly right. C-47 was a budget implementation bill. So in a little while, the government again will table a budget. So that's a broad policy document. The House of Commons will debate the budget and likely pass it. There's a supply and confidence agreement or a coalition between the Liberals and the NDP. So they have enough numbers. And at the end of the day, politics in the House of Commons is just math. I mean, it's just numbers. More votes voting in favor than voting against. And I'll get to why that's so important in a little bit. But so last year, what they were able to do is through so once the broad policy is passed, then they need to put forward what we call Budget Implementation Acts, BIAs. And there'll be a number of them. And Bill C-47 was one of those implementation acts. So what they have to do is once they pass the policy of the budget, then they got to pass implementation acts to change legislation. Well, they snuck it in there. It wasn't even. I don't even think anybody was aware this was going on at the time. These documents are massive. They're thick documents. They change numerous statutes, and one would presume that all of these changes that are being made would actually have something to do with the budget policy that was discussed and debated in the House of Commons for a week. And then, lo and behold, we find out that they've changed the definition of natural health products and making them like a therapeutic. And of course, you're fully aware, and as is everybody who's probably watching this, the impact that the self-care model is going to change the way the regulations are. And that's so the first step is to change the law, and the law gives you the ability to change the regulations. So that's what I believe Health Canada is going through the process now, is getting ready to implement the regulations that they've now got under this past legislation. But the campaign from your organization, the NHPPA, and other organizations that are equally as upset about this have done an amazing job of raising awareness with MPs, and that's where I got the idea. I looked at the stack. I got a stack of these things like this, and I looked at the recommendations. What is it that you're asking for? And one of them was to repeal those sections of Bill C-47, sections, I think it was 500 to 504, if I remember off the top of my head.
Yep.
And I thought, well, that can't be very hard to do. So we started going through the process here in my office. I've got a legislative assistant who started looking at that. We had a bill that was drawn up by the legislative drafters here at work on Parliament Hill. And then I cross-referenced with what you had. They were virtually the same bill, except for I think you had something a little more comprehensive in there, dealing with people who might be undergoing a process where they might be in trouble, and making sure that we go back not only to the status quo, but rescind any actions that people might be going through. So we thought that was a worthwhile thing to put in there as well. So I was confident going ahead. So we put that bill forward on December 5th, tabled it at first reading in the House of Commons. First reading is just simply table. It's just getting on the agenda, right? You can't have a meeting anywhere unless, not a bona fide meeting, unless you actually have an agenda. So the first reading is just simply the act of putting something on the agenda. So I introduced that bill. There was a little clip of it, I think, at the start of the show, and I talked about keeping your hands off of our supplements and vitamins, and had a little 1 minute introduction of the bill. But here's how this works, and I don't know if you want me to get into these details right now, but here's generally how this works. So folks that aren't familiar with how the legislation is passed in our country, if the bill starts with a C, that means it was its initial tabling was in the House of Commons. If it starts with an S, it was originally tabled in the Senate. That's how you know the two chambers that we have. We have a bicameral parliament. We have two houses. So if it starts with a C, House of Commons, starts with an S, it's the Senate. If the bill number is less than 200, so if it's C2, C47, for example, that way you know that that bill was actually tabled by a minister in right of the Crown on behalf of the Government of Canada, and only ministers can table government legislation. The rest of us have an opportunity through something called private members' bills. So if the bill has a number of 200 or greater, that's the indicator, or that's the mark that it is a private member's bill, or a Senate bill would have the same process. Senate Bill 214, for example, whatever it happens to be, that would be a bill that would be put forward by an individual senator. So these bills are treated a little bit differently in the to and fro of negotiations. Government has care and control of the House of Commons most days for what is called government business, and what's on debate during government business is likely either a government motion or debate on a government bill, such as C-47. Once everybody's done talking, or once the government moves time allocation, or once the negotiated time has expired, then the House of Commons makes a decision, passes a judgment on that bill, and votes on it. That's called second reading, the first time we go through that process. But for a private member's bill, it works a bit differently. 1 hour is allocated every day in the House of Commons for a private member's bill to be debated. Now, these things get bumped. Sometimes private members' business can get bumped from a particular day. And the way private members' business is decided is after every election, they do a lottery. So there's 338 MPs in the House of Commons. So we were ranked, our names, basically names drawn out of a hat. That's how this works. And you'll get a number in the in that process, and that's your private member's number. Now, if you're appointed to cabinet, you're removed from that list, because if you're a cabinet minister, as I've already explained, you can just simply table legislation as a cabinet minister and get a government bill number for that. If you're a parliamentary secretary, I believe you're also removed from that list, and it's called the order of precedence. I think my original number here was around 100, a little under 100, so that's good. Usually you have to be under 100 in order to get your bill debated in a 4-year parliamentary cycle. If your number is much higher than that, there's a chance that you won't even get to your first hour of debate. First hour of debate, what does that mean? So we start off with the first 30, and that's the initial tranche. So the first 30 MPs in that order of precedence, when the House of Commons starts up after an election, that's the private members roster, and we go through. Every MP gets 2 hours of debate, either on their bill or their motion. You can put forward a bill or a motion. And then once you've had your first hour of debate, then you go back to the bottom of the list of the people currently in what's called the replenishment. And then once those bills are disposed of, either passed and gone on to the next stage, or defeated and not continuing forward, or they're off in committee, eventually, when there's enough room in the time allocations, they'll have a new replenishment. So I just went through that replenishment process. I think this is a third or fourth replenishment that we've had since the last election. And the first hour of debate for Bill C-368 will be happening approximately April 19th. Now that can move. It's already been moved. I get emails almost on a daily basis from the Journals branch here in the House of Commons, who keeps track of these things, letting me know where that what that date is. So I think we're going to have some changes again, because the budget is going to be dropped between now and April 19th, which will likely mean that private members' business for that day will get set aside. So that'll probably push the bill back. Now, I think the 19th is a Friday, and I think it'll push that then to the following Monday. So that would be in 2022. That could be the 22nd of April. That would be the first hour of debate. So I will get up and talk first about that bill for 10 minutes. Then I'll take some questions, and then members of parliament from other parties will get up and have 10-minute speeches until that hour is done. And then I'll be dropped down into the replenishment, or into the order, and cycles through again. I don't know when it will come up for second reading again, but there will be a second hour of debate. And that'll happen either I can't see it happening in May. It might happen in late May. It might happen in June, depending on how things go. It may actually get set aside until September. What's important to know is after that process is done, after those 2 hours of debate have concluded, that's when the vote will happen. and all members of the House of Commons will be allowed to vote, obviously, or encouraged to vote. I'm working really hard right now to change the votes, because it was Liberal MPs and NDP MPs that voted in favor of Bill C-47. And that's what's put us in the current position that the health products industry is in. So we really need to change those votes. And I don't even know the Bloc, even though the Bloc Québécois, the Quebec-only party, voted against Bill C-47, we can't presume that the reason they voted against C-47 was to do with natural health products. So the reality is it's about 170 votes in order to carry the House. 169 is half. 170 would be for sure. There's about 120 of us as Conservatives. Every one of us, to my knowledge, will be voting in favor of my private member's bill. So we need 50 more MPs. The Bloc Québécois has 30 some MPs. The NDP has 20 some MPs. So we're going to need good numbers of both of those. And even, I don't know what the Liberals are going to do. We're going to find out. We'll normally find out in the first hour of debate. MPs will get up from various parties and generally talk about their party's position in that first hour of debate. But the goal now is to make sure that the bill passes at second reading. That vote, like I said, could come up as early as June, but it could be as late as September. And then the bill would go to committee. And that's what we want to do. We want to get to committee. We want to have people come in and testify before the committee. Now, when a government bill goes to committee, and this is where it gets a little more complicated again, a government bill can go to a committee indefinitely. Now, legislation is always the priority for a committee. So a committee has to deal with the legislation. A committee has to deal with legislation that's before it as a matter of priority. Sometimes they have multiple bills before them, and that's fine. But private members' business and private members' bills, actually in the orders, and I believe this is still the case, at least I've been an MP for 18 years, this has always been the case. Private members' bills have to be disposed of at committee within 45 days. So if the committee does not have time to study the bill, and they don't grant themselves through a motion more time to study the bill, then the bill is deemed passed and reported back to the House of Commons for third reading. I don't expect that's what's going to happen. This bill would go to the Health Committee. I would imagine the Health Committee would certainly debate this bill, but the Health Committee would still only have 45 days in order to do it. And then we're hoping that the bill doesn't get amended in any significant or in any way that would be change the intent, which is to go at least back to the status quo. And then it would come back to the House for third reading, and we'd start that process all over again, where it would be back into the mix, and there would be 2 hours of debate, just like there was at second reading, and then the bill would come to a third reading vote after that, and be ushered off to the Senate, and then it becomes a completely different game of trying to get the Senate to recognize the bill as quickly as possible. So there's a long road. We're just getting started. We've just taken the first few steps in the legislative process, but there is time to do it in this Parliament. If we go to the fall of 2025, there's no reason to think that this bill couldn't be passed before the next federal election. So, and that's my goal.
All right. Well, thanks so much for that, Blaine. And very interesting just to understand the process. As we were talking about off air, I think that a lot of people, like myself, just have no idea. We don't know what the timelines look like. There's a lot of people that are just not really understanding how that process works. Some people think it takes very long, some people very short. So thank you for that. So, you mentioned something earlier about the implementation of the regulations. And I think that, I'm sort of reading this two ways. One is we're trying to see this bill that you've put in. We want to sort of see that through, which is obviously going to take some time. But in the same time, in the background, we've got the regulatory side of things for C-47 that is now, they're starting to implement that. Do we have any timelines on that? Like, am I making myself clear?
Well, yeah, no, I understand the question perfectly
Okay,
well. So the government right now, Health Canada has the authority. The legislation has been passed. C-47 has given them the instruments and tools that they need to put the regulatory framework in place. They still should have to be going through, and maybe others can talk about this a little bit more. They still have to go through the same regulatory process Regulations have to be posted in the Canada Gazette. There's usually a consultation period, so it's not something that should be blindsiding anybody, but it's a much easier thing to do. So what folks need to know about the regulatory process is once the legislation is passed by MPs in the House of Commons, that's really the only say that MPs have on a matter. A regulatory matter is done through an order in council. So it goes through the Canada Gazette. There's a consultation period. There's feedback. They may amend or change the regulations, but the regulations, in order to be actually put in place by law, is simply done through something called an order in council, or an OIC, and that's simply done by cabinet. They can go and have a cabinet meeting once they've gone through the required process for a regulatory change or introduction of new regulations, and then only a handful of it would only be the cabinet ministers of the current government, the Liberal government in Canada, that would be making that determination. So it was their idea to put it in they're the original drafters of C-47, even though they had the support of the NDP in the House of Commons on C-47. The Liberals have passed this bill, and my guess is that they're trying to see it through, which is why it's so important that the remainder of the House, the majority of MPs who are not in the Liberal caucus, need to vote in favor of my bill in order to stop this process as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we're at the mercy of the Liberal government's regulatory process.
Yeah, and sorry, Shawn, just out of curiosity, I'm sure many folks are interested. What's the sort of conversation, behind the scenes with MPs? Has this been well received, or were MPs aware of this, or what's that conversation looking like in the background?
Well, look, I think that based on the campaign, I think everybody's aware of it. But what they're going to do yet or not, I haven't been able to make that determination other than just talking to a couple of MPs. Like I said, we're still fairly early in the process, but I had some stops earlier this week in the Greater Toronto area. I went to the college there for traditional Chinese medicine and met with them and heard about the gravity of the situation. And Shawn, you've already alluded to that in your opening remarks. It'll basically be the end of Chinese traditional medicine or traditional Chinese medicine in Canada. Even though this is widely accepted practice in other parts of the world, it would basically be the end of that option for that health option for Canadians. And of course, I've stopped in at numerous health food stores who are very much worried about not only the cost. I mean, the costs are going to be insurmountable, but it's the changing these health products, most of which are just basically food or refined food, or giving them a drug number. It doesn't make any sense. Treating them like a therapeutic, and then applying the therapeutic rules for approval and the costs of therapeutic approval. So those two things are basically going to be. Other than just, I can't see it happening. I can't see anything other than very large companies selling very generic blends of this or that, having the ability to survive, and practitioners and others will not have the ability to maintain their businesses, and that's a legitimate fear. But also something that I don't know if this gets talked about much in the industry, but many people across this country have benefit plans, health benefit plans. They have health spending accounts that they have with their benefit plans. Mm-hmm. And if we remove these options from those plans, it's going to make it very, it's taking away something that's a hard fought for benefit. And we all know that when you don't make something affordable, legal and affordable, it does one of two things. It either shuts down the business or it drives it underground. And nobody wants that. The industry is very credible. It's many, millions of Canadians use natural health products every day. And this simply doesn't make, for the life of me, I can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, you would think that with a healthcare system that is under so much pressure, right, that we have this entire branch or field of alternative healthcare that people are relying on to keep them healthy. And, as far as I can see, what's coming down the pipeline here is that's going to be removed, which in actual fact will put even more pressure on the current healthcare system.
And just, so can I just jump in? Because I just wanted to ask you something, Blaine, because one of the focuses is what can the people viewing this do? And am I correct? Like, so you told us, you're confident the Conservative MPs are going to support the bill. And we note that Pierre Poilievre had come out actually very recently saying, we're basically supporting people's right to access natural health products. So, but because this isn't a government bill, am I correct that Liberal MPs and NDP MPs may be allowed to vote as they want, that they may not have to follow party lines?
Well, I'm not privy to what goes on in a NDP or a Liberal or a Bloc Québécois caucus meeting. But I think there's been a few indications from discussions at committees and a few indications that the NDP might be flexible in changing their opinion on this particular matter. So I've taken it out of the budget. They can't say, oh well, we had to vote for it because it was a budget. They can't say that anymore, because this is the only issue that's on the that's on the paper when we're going to vote on 368. It's the only issue. You can't conflate it with any other issue. So what the Liberals do, I don't know if they're going to be granted a free vote. I mean, it's going to be very difficult because they've asked their MPs to vote on this as a matter of confidence in a budget implementation act, and it would be politically, I think, very it would be a climb down for the Liberal government to recognize that they've made a mistake. But without getting overly political, they've had numerous climb downs on other pieces of legislation and other things they've tried to do. So maybe there'll be some flexibility within the Liberal caucus. I don't know that at this particular point in time, but I do know that that when the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the NDP vote on an issue in the same way, that we will win that vote every time, because it's just the math. The Liberals have a minority, and whether we get any Liberals to vote for this bill or not, if all the other parties vote in favor of Bill C-368, then it will indeed pass. So, but I would encourage people. I mean, this is the path to victory for returning at least to the status quo of the natural health products industry, is to find out whether your MP. So the math is similar. It's very simple. If your MP was an NDP MP or a Liberal MP, they voted in favor of Bill C-47. They're the reason that we're having this conversation. So if that's who your MP's political party is, you need to reach out to your MP and ask them to vote in favor of my bill and undo the damage that they're doing to the natural health products industry. And that's a conversation. MPs respond best to the pressure from their own constituents. I can do all the arm twisting, I can do all the arguing I want on the floor of the House of Commons. Ultimately, at the end of the day, MPs want to get reelected, so they want to listen. In theory, anyway, this is how it's supposed to work. They want to listen to their constituents and their voters, and I'm giving them an opportunity to change their mind and realize the damage that they're doing, and listen to their constituents, because I think overwhelmingly across the country, every single MP's got a natural health food store in at least one of their communities, and like I said, there's millions of Canadians that use these products on a daily basis. Why don't we keep those products in Canada? Why don't we keep those practitioners in Canada? Why don't we keep that product development in Canada? Why would we drive that underground? Why would we drive that offshore? It doesn't make any sense. We don't need to overburden. There's nothing wrong with the industry right now. There's nobody. There's no rationale that I can see that makes any sense for the heavy-handed approach the government has taken.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for that. And I think it's a perfect segue, just to bring us into the close today. People are often unsure of how to actually approach their elected officials. So I don't know if you want to give us any pointers. What do MPs respond best to? How should we navigate that as citizens?
Well, look, I would like to think I consider myself a reasonable person. If you come to an MP with a reasonable approach and a reasoned request about why this matters, there is no end of literature and information out there, whether it's the Natural Health Products Protection Association, the Canadian Health Food Association, even the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. They're all on side with Bill C-368. Every one of those organizations represents people in different walks of their life, depending on what they're doing. And when you have that much consensus and you have that many pan-Canadian organizations that are supporting something, then it's pretty simple and straightforward. The message is very simple and very straightforward. We value our natural health products. They're safe, they're effective, they're reliable, and we want to keep not only the businesses, but also the products, the manufacturing, the growers, and the entire supply chain here in Canada. It adds to our economy, and of course, most importantly, it gives Canadians the choice in health that they want, and frankly, sometimes that they need. And why would the government want to jeopardize or threaten that in any way, shape, or form? There's no overwhelming argument that I can see in any way that these products are not safe. We know that they work. We know that it's been working for, in some cases, thousands of years. So I mean, I don't want to make the answer any more complicated than it is. But I remember I went to school a long time ago, but I took a botany class as part of my science degree. It's called Drug Plants of the World, and at that particular point in time, it was like something like 70 or 80% of all the therapeutics in the world were actually derived originally from plants and from food-based products. So I mean, we can still use those same products today. We can use them safely. The amount of information and knowledge that we have. And there are scientific studies out there that back these things up. And I'm not aware of anybody that's been harmed by using natural health products. So safe, reliable, and it provides a lot of choice for Canadians when it comes to looking after their own health. So again, just reasonable arguments to these MPs, and just remind them that you're a voter. And if this is a ballot box issue for you, here's your opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Shawn, I'm going to hand things back over to you. What can people do just in the interim? Obviously, we've got a little bit of time between now and reading, as Blaine has laid out, the sort of path forward here. What can people watching do leading into that?
Right. So thanks for the question, Brett. So there's a couple of things in it. It's a matter of action, and we think because this is a matter that we need the Liberal caucus to actually be having a discussion saying this has become a big issue for Canadians. We are going to have to climb down from this and allow, non-cabinet members to vote freely. And we need the NDP to back down also so that their members can vote freely. And the only way we're going to do that is by communicating, consistently and enough so that they understand this truly is an issue that concerns you. It truly is an issue that we want to get into committee. And when you go and meet with your MPs, I mean, you can say, listen, we're just talking about getting the bill into committee so the Standing Committee of Health can give Parliament advice on it. It's not like it becomes law. We just want to get past this next hurdle. So if your MP is NDP, if your NDP is Liberal, my gosh, you've got to be writing them letters and you've got to be signing the petition. Now, at the NHPPA website, so just nhppa.org, at the top of the page, there's a sign the petition. You click on that, it'll take you to a page that will tell you how you can take action, including signing the petition. But before you go and sign the petition, we have a sample letter for you to print out. So, print it out, sign it, put it in an envelope. If you address it to the House of Commons address, there isn't even a need for you to put postage on it. But actually print two out and send one to the constituency office, which you do need postage, and one to the House of Commons, because it's just numbers. But also send a letter to the Prime Minister, send a letter to the party leader for the NDP. Send a letter to the Minister of Health. The idea is to let the NDP, and then and to the leader of the Bloc Québécois. And if you know anyone in Quebec or you're in Quebec and you have a Bloc MP, my word, create whole networks, because that's where we're weak right now is the networks in Quebec. And when Bill C-51 was rolling around in 2008, we learned that people in Quebec are equally concerned about accessing natural health products and equally concerned about their health rights. So we really need to get, networks created in Quebec, and you can do that yourself. So in my mind, Brett, the answer to the question is we have to keep up with the pressure, and don't just write one letter. I mean, write your own letter and send the letter again, in a couple of weeks, and ask for meetings. Don't just a one-off. We have to get this into committee. This is too important. And so like, don't think, oh yeah, I've spent my 15 minutes and I'm done. No, this should be a weekly thing. And, you can call the MP's office and speak with their staff, see if you can speak to the MP. You can ask for a meeting. And Mr. Calkins is clear, like, be reasonable. If somebody showed up at your front door and they're angry, you're all of a sudden on the defensive and you're not listening. So you always have to be cordial. You always have to be polite. And you don't have to convince them, but you're introducing your ideas and you're letting them know that it's an issue of concern. So the soft approach is always more effective. And just keep at it, because this is important. So,
Yeah,
Blaine, I don't know if...
Yeah, just be firm, but be reasonable. But be firm. There's no and I've always, and this is just me, I can't speak for everybody else, but I've always taken personal letters or individualized letters. If I get a vast number of those, I take that a little bit more seriously than form letters, but I take the form letters seriously too. If I get volumes of them, obviously people are concerned. But if people have time to individualize their concerns through a letter or through an email, but the best thing to do, you're absolutely right, is to ask for a meeting and see if you can get a meeting with your MP and take your concerns and just talk about it with them. Be firm, but be reasonable. And you need to change their minds, because you need to change their vote. And that's the only way this is going to work.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you both so much. That was a great discussion. I think a lot of people have clearly, they're going to learn a lot watching this, if you're watching the recording. And thank you both for your expertise, your work. I know that the natural health community, this is a big one for us. Obviously, a lot of us, our careers are on the line, as much as access to natural health products are. So this is definitely an important issue. And I thank you both for introducing this bill. And hopefully the path forward, it looks optimistic. Let's put it that way. So I want to thank you both for your time today. It was great.
Thank you, Brett.
Okay, thanks. Happy to come back anytime you need me.
All right, thank you. And I think we're going to sign off.